Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well, and yes, the time has come once again. It's time for a brand new tier list video, this time the November edition. Now I know what you're thinking, gee, November? What kind of time is this? It's December, sis. I know, I'm aware, I'm filming this on the 1st of December, but I have a lot going on, okay, so please don't judge me. And I did want to point out that this is actually going to be the final tier list video of the year, because December is coming up, the final month of the year, and you guys know that is a very busy time here on this channel. We have plenty of rankings to do and we have some awards to give out, and so I thought I would focus on all of that fun stuff coming in December and have this November edition of the tier list be the last one of the year. And what better way to end the 2023 tier list series than to celebrate the release of the 62nd Disney animated classic in Wish. Not only that though, because of course this is a very special year for Disney, as they are also celebrating their 100th anniversary. So I thought it'd be a fun idea to go through, of course, the Disney animated classics for this month's tier list video, and I am so excited, guys. I am so excited because what better way to celebrate the legacy of the Disney company than to dive into the animated classics that so many of us around the world have come to know and love. As I mentioned before, Wish is the 62nd Disney animated classic from the official animated classics lineup, okay? And so obviously that is a lot of films to go through in one video, and you guys know that I like to talk. You guys know that I be talking, okay? So it would literally take me like 57 hours if I was to do all 62 films in one video. And so I have decided to break this tier list up into 3 parts. So today we're going to be diving into 20 out of the 62 animated classics, and they are all in random order. All I did to get the selection of films is list all of the 62 animated classics from 1 to 62, and then I used Google's random number generator to select the number of films that I would be discussing today. Of course, this is just going to be a part 1 to this little mini series within a series. I will be continuing on with the Disney animated classics tier list videos sometime in the future, but of course that means that you guys need to make sure that you are subscribed to my channel. Yes, make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next, especially for the month of December. Oh, you do not want to be caught slipping in the month of December, because we have a lot going on and I can't wait to dive into it. But before we get into the December madness, I'm so excited to delve into my tier list ranking for the Disney animated classics, part 1. Okay, so first of all, as per usual, before we dive into the ranking itself, we are going to be discussing the tier names. Now, you guys know, if you watch these ranking videos, you know that I love coming up with tier names, okay, for each of these tiers. But this time, I really cooked, if I do say so myself. This time I was hit with a lightning bolt of genius, because I came up with the idea of naming each of the tiers after a famous Disney animated classic song. So I'm going to be going through all of the names and I'm going to be diving into what they all mean, but you should be able to tell from the song titles, which is just so impressive because it speaks to just how many amazing songs have come out from these animated classics, that I was able to create a whole tier list, okay, with the tier categories that have these famous songs featured, and it makes sense. It makes sense for each tier. Like, I can't wait to show you. Anyways, but I wanted to mention it beforehand because I wanted to give you a chance to guess which film each song comes from. I will reveal the answers at the end of this little section, but it's just a fun little activity to test your Disney animated classics knowledge. There are 6 songs in total, and they're not too hard in my opinion as a huge Disney fan, but I don't know, you guys let me know, and make sure you don't cheat. No cheating, please. It's no fun if you cheat. Don't just Google it, okay? You have to know from your own memory. Starting off with the tippity top of the bunch, and that is A Star Is Born. Yes, A Star is Born is the S tier of today's tier list. And this is a tier that is reserved for the creme de la creme. I often name this tier creme de la creme or something along those lines, but like I said, we're going down the Disney route, right? If we're going to do it, we're going to do it well. So A Star is Born is representing the best of the very best of Disney animated classics. And then next up, following suit, we have Honor to Us All. I think this is an easy one. I think for those of you who are guessing in the comments, I think this is an easy one, right? Honor to Us All is the tier reserved for the respectable, the brilliant, the really, really fun Disney films that are still great, don't get me wrong, but they're not quite like, they're not S tier, you know, they're not A Star is Born. They're just, maybe they're just falling short just a little bit of that creme de la creme quality. And next one down we've got is You're Welcome. Now, You're Welcome can mean two things. Either it's coming from me saying you're welcome because I have reminded you of how great this film is, despite perhaps being underrated or overly hated, right? Like maybe I'm just kind of giving this film a shout out and telling you guys, listen, as someone who watches a lot of these Disney animated classics many times throughout the year, I'm telling you this is good. I'm telling you this is better than you remember. So once you check it out, you can come back to me and say, Jean, you were right. And I'll be like, listen, you're welcome. Or this could also be a you're welcome from Disney, because perhaps this film was underappreciated and underestimated at the time, but now you've checked it out upon my recommendation and you discovered that it's actually brilliant and really underrated. And so yeah, Disney can also be like, you're welcome. On its 100th anniversary, you can be like, listen, I've given you all that I could. You're welcome. The next tier down has a beautiful name that, in my opinion, was kind of a stroke of genius. Okay, I'm just, listen, not to toot my own horn, but I did this. Like, I actually did that, okay? But the next one down is Dig a Little Deeper. Again, if you know which film this comes from, you're a real one. But Dig a Little Deeper is the perfect description for this tier, which is why I'm like, wow, this was a brilliant idea. But Dig a Little Deeper is the tier reserved for the films that just, we need a bit more, I'm afraid. We need, oh, we're almost there. We're almost on the cusp of something, but we're falling a bit short. They needed to dig a little deeper. Maybe it was the animation, maybe it was the story, maybe it was just the villain or the hero or the sidekick. Something is just not clicking. And so unfortunately, we can't really put it in the top 2 or even 3 tiers of this ranking. The next one down, listen, this song needs no introduction, really. You guys will immediately know which film it came from. And it's the perfect descriptor for this specific tier, because this is the lowest tier of the bunch. This is for the films that's just like, this, this is the dark ages, you know what I mean? Like, oh, Disney just was not thriving during that time when they made that film. Now, to be frank, as a fan of these films, there are very few that I would say are like atrocious. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like Marvel in a way, where it's like, even the ones that people call the worst are still kind of watchable, in my opinion. Like, I wouldn't have a horrible time rewatching them. I wouldn't be happy, but I wouldn't have a horrible time. I wouldn't feel like I'm being tortured. And it's the same thing with the Disney animated classics, which is very impressive considering there are 109 of them. But this next tier is the one that's reserved for the worst of the bunch, in my opinion. And it's We Don't Talk About Bruno. we don't talk about Bruno. Like, we gotta forget Bruno for a second here, because finally, if you watch my tier list videos, you know I like to include a category for the films or TV shows that I simply am just not too familiar with. These are the projects that are, maybe I did catch it, okay, maybe I did watch it, but it didn't really have a lasting impression on me, and so like I've forgotten. Like, you could point a gun to my head and I wouldn't be able to give you a breakdown of the plot or the character. Like, I've forgotten, like amnesia, okay? Sometimes it happens. And listen, I have watched all of these Disney animated classics at least one time, all of them, okay? Just because I wanted to be able to say that I've watched all of them. So I definitely have. I definitely made use of that Disney Plus subscription, but there are some that I just watched one time, like I said, just to be able to say that I watched it all, and it just had no lasting impression on me. And honestly, to be frank, with this selection that I got from Google, okay, with the random number generator, unfortunately there are quite a few in this category, but we'll discuss, okay? But the name of this tier is another name that I actually gave myself a pat on the back for, because like I did that again, and it's Into the Unknown. Get it? Like Into the because I don't know her. Usually that's what this tier is called. I don't know her, but Into the Unknown is just mwah, a stroke of genius, if I do say so myself. Okay, so those are all of the tiers for today's tier list, and before we dive into the ranking itself, it's time to give you guys the answers. So be sure to comment down below with your guesses for where each of these songs come from. I'll give you a minute. Just waiting. And now it's time for the answers. So we'll go from bottom to top. First one up, we have Into the Unknown, which is of course from Frozen 2. Next one is We Don't Talk About Bruno, which I think is the most obvious one, especially of recent years, because it is from, of course, Encanto. Next one up, Dig a Little Deeper. If I have to tell you this, if I have to tell you where that comes from, then I'm concerned, but it is of course from Princess and the Frog. Next one up we've got is You're Welcome, which is from Moana, of course, sung by Maui. And next one up on the second tier, we have Honor to Us All, which is a classic from Mulan. And the top tier might unfortunately be the most obscure one. So if you got this one off the top of your head, then well done you're a real fan. And it is A Star Is Born from Hercules, the final song from Hercules. So guys, now that we have gone through the tier category names and we've even done a little quiz, it's time to dive into the main event. Let's go through these rankings. So the first film up is already a pretty big deal, and that is Beauty and the Beast. So listen, I am aware that Beauty and the Beast is a beloved film. Oh, people love that film. The first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture. Not Best Animated, but Best Picture in general at the Academy Awards. This film is a huge, huge deal. But you know, I don't have that relationship with Beauty and the Beast, I'm afraid, and it's because of this little story that I'm about to tell you. So growing up, we had a cassette. Yes, I'm that old. We had a cassette of Beauty and the Beast that we used to watch on occasion, and we thought this film was like fine, but it was just like, it wasn't really giving, and I didn't quite understand why my friends would like love Beauty and the Beast that much. I would just be like, huh, like it's okay. Like me and my 8-year-old self, I'd be like, it's okay, but it's not, you know. But it was only years after, when I was about 11, 12-ish, that I came to realize, I came to find out that the cassette of Beauty and the Beast that we had was not of the original film. It was of the Christmas special. It was of the Christmas special, which was by far inferior to the original film. And so at a time when we should have fallen in love with the story of Beauty and the Beast, instead we were forced to endure the story of the Beauty and the Beast Christmas special, which is nowhere near the quality of the original film. But by the time that I realized this, unfortunately it was too late for the indoctrination. Because the first time I watched the actual Beauty and the Beast, I was too busy thinking like, why is she falling in love with a bestiality, boo. And you remember the early 2010s, how critical it was of these Disney films like that. That was not a good time for me to be watching this film for the first time. So unfortunately, I don't really have too much of an attachment to it. Sorry. So with all of that being said, let's decide where to rank this thing. I don't want to be disrespectful. It's the thing. I don't want you guys coming after me, and I don't want to be seen as disrespectful. I still acknowledge that it is universally almost beloved, but like, this is my ranking, so I have to be honest. I would put this in, I would put this in Honor to Us All, Yes. Okay, so next up on the list, we have a more recent addition in Big Hero 6. And, oh, we're not off to a great start, are we? I'm so sorry. Like I said, this selection was chosen by Google's random number generator. So, like, I had no control here. But I've never really loved Big Hero 6 either, I'm afraid. I love Baymax, don't get me wrong. Listen, that's the that is the difference between Beauty and the Beast and Big Hero 6, because I at least love the sidekick. Baymax is an icon. Baymax is up there almost with Wall-E as one of the most iconic Disney non-human characters that are also kind of robot. Anyway, the point is Baymax is so cool. I really like Baymax, but other than Baymax and other than the kind of like Tokyo style of the film itself, not much really stands out from its story. Now, if this was a film that you grew up watching time and time again, then you will absolutely disagree with me. This is just like a kind of a generational thing, but not really, because there are some later editions that I know better. But either way, I didn't connect with this one, I'm afraid. I really didn't. I can't even remember the name of the main character. I know what he looks like, but I just can't. And I know that his like mum died or something. Like he had the death of a parent, so that makes him a solid Disney character. Didn't his brother pass away? His brother passed away and he was a really brilliant character. So that was super sad, I think, from what I remember. But listen, let's not waste any time here. We have a lot to get through. I think it's fair to say that this is into the unknown. For me, this is into the unknown, because I watched it once, maybe 1.5 times, and it's just, it didn't really leave a lasting impression on me. Okay, so next up, this is a film that is all magic and very little storyline, and that is Fantasia 2000. Yes, this is the millennial remake of Fantasia, and Fantasia is essentially more like an amalgamation of, you know, short stories that are told with these orchestral pieces in the background. Just like the first version of Fantasia, Fantasia 2000 is more about the music, and it's more about demonstrating artistry through music and also through these different styles of animation. Now, whilst I really appreciate this more experimental style from Disney that again was remade in this 2000 version, it's never really been like my favorite Disney animated classic. Like I said, there's a lot of magic here, just in terms of the artistry, the experimentation. They just went, you know, go big or go home, and they did that with the Fantasia films. But first of all, Fantasia 2000 isn't quite as good as the first one, in my opinion. And secondly, when it comes to both of them, I just don't think of them as the best Disney animated classics, and I think it's because you are missing that more like linear story where you can follow a character's journey and become invested in their story. You know, the sort of thing that we see in like 99% of the other Disney animated classics. And so in light of that, I'm going to be putting Fantasia 2000 into the unknown. Yeah, we're gonna do that. Okay, so next up on the list we have, I can't even see that. Is that Oliver and Company? Oh my god, I got the worst selection. Google. Oliver and Company. Okay, so this is a film that came out in the 80s, I believe, 1988, if I had to guess. And this, you know, this film came out at a time when Disney really wasn't at its peak. They were kind of struggling with several Disney animated classics just really underperforming, and they were just trying to find their footing, I think. Disney, for decades in the 20th century, especially after the death of Walt Disney, its founder of course, who was also the mind behind the creative decisions at the company, whereas his brother dealt with the financial side of things. But after his passing, the company was kind of scrambling. The company was kind of, you know, it was running around like a headless chicken, and so they threw several things at the wall, and you know, some things stuck, some things didn't. In the case of films like Oliver and Company, I would say whilst they are entertaining, you know, Disney cartoons to watch, especially as a kid, I imagine, but I watched this much later, in fact just like a few years ago for the very first time. So whilst they are super entertaining, entertaining. The animation is pretty decent. The characters are fun and cute and generally likable. We also have a sprinkling of some pretty iconic voice actors, like I believe Bette Midler is in this one as well. So they did have the essence of what makes a lot of these Disney animated classics so fun and so great, but they just weren't in the upper echelons of Disney creativity and innovation and magic. They just lacked that Disney magic. Now, I said recently in my Wish review that Disney is 100 years old. It has gone through all of the ups and downs that any company would go through, which is why I'm not terribly fatalistic about their current circumstances, even though they've had a really crappy centenary. But I think, you know, Disney has seen this before. It's gone through this before. So hopefully they're able to get out of this slump and see the return of the innovation and creativity and imagination that made the company so great and made it last for 100 years in the beginning. I can definitely say that films like Oliver and Company are certainly not the reason why Disney is 100 years old. Like, it just would not have been able to sustain itself and its success off of films like this that are decent but not iconic. And so with that in mind, let's discuss where I would rank this. I would say we gotta dig a little deeper, because we absolutely do. In order to survive, we best dig deeper. But otherwise we're dead. Otherwise, with this competition, okay, on these streets, Disney would not survive with more mediocrity like this. Okay, so next up, we have a bit more fun with a more recent release, and that is Frozen. Frozen, which itself is celebrating an anniversary, and that is its 10th anniversary. And this, I mean, if you want to talk about hits, okay, this is one of the most successful Disney animated classics of all time, both financially, both creatively, I would say, both in terms of the songs and also in terms of its cultural impact. Frozen was that girl. Frozen was inescapable. Frozen was a cultural reset. That song, the song that shall not be named, the song that shall not be named, that song was just like it reached new heights of success. Like I genuinely think the executives must have just lost their minds when they saw the impact that Frozen had. But Frozen was really that girl. Yep. In the year 2013, she owned it. She owned that entire year. That's crazy. 365 days she owned. And I strongly believe that the reason why Frozen was such a huge hit and it was so successful is because it brilliantly embodied so many of the important Disney animated classics elements. First up, you have these really great characters in Elsa and Anna. Now, Anna is the like girl next door, happy-go-lucky type of character who's easy to like on her own. But she has that added layer to her story and her persona that gives her a little bit of sadness, a little bit of pathos, which makes her a little bit more of an interesting character than your bland bread and butter type of gal. And that is because of her bittersweet relationship to her sister Elsa, who is the more compelling character, right? Because she's verging on being an anti-hero, not really an anti-hero of her own making, but just because of the circumstances that she's born into, with these powers that she doesn't know how to control, and she's been told from childhood that she needs to conceal, don't feel. And of course we know that if there's one thing that we all love, it's an anti-hero, okay, it's a tortured protagonist. We love that stuff, and Elsa encompasses that brilliantly. Another thing that Frozen does really, really well is the villain. This was one of the few examples ever, as someone who watches a ton of films, a ton of TV shows, I know what's up, like been there, done that, got the t-shirt. This was one of the few examples, guys, where I genuinely was shook. I was shook by hands. I will put my hands up and say I was taken by surprise, okay? I was bamboozled. I was led astray. I was just as shook as Anna because I genuinely did not see that coming. When he turns around and he's like, better find someone who actually loves you then, or something along those lines, right? Something sassy like that. I was like, oh no. I was gagged. I was literally gagged. I was on the floor with Anna and then she freezes and I'm like, oh my God, Disney. It was a subversion of, you know, the classic Disney tropes of these Disney princesses falling in love with a guy that they've only just met. They have a whole song together about it, and it's all, you know, cute and dandy. But in the end, where he switches up, honestly, that's like a life lesson. Honestly, girls, pay attention. Sisters, pay attention. This film is a life lesson because you need to keep one eye open at all times. Look at Hans. You thought he was the perfect guy, and then and then of course you had the brilliant animation. I mean, this was just a feast for the eyes. You had the similar approach to the character design that we saw in Tangled, but the overall animation is also stunning. The icicles that they designed, I mean, this is top-notch stuff. This is the kind of stuff that you would expect from Disney animation, and they knocked it out of the park. And not to mention, of course, as I hinted at earlier, the music. The whole Frozen soundtrack is a hit. Yes, it is. It's a classic, it's a bop. Like they killed it with the music. You know, Let It Go, it pissed me off at the time, not gonna lie. You know, after hearing it time and time again, I was like, please, 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 let me go. You guys need to let it go. Everyone used to make that joke, like, you need to let this song go, okay? But in hindsight, you know, when you take a look at the roster, the 62 films, if you want to talk about a top-notch soundtrack, you've got to include Frozen in that discussion. So actually, funnily enough, I think you know, as I'm sitting here, have convinced myself to rank this film a little bit higher than I thought I would, because I do have a lot of respect for Frozen. She is a cultural phenomenon, so let's pay her respect. I'm gonna put her in Honor to Us All, and I'm gonna put her above Beauty and the Beast, because that bestiality I'm sorry, I can never get behind Belle and the Beast, I'm sorry. But the message in Frozen is, again, so much more modern, so much more contemporary and applicable. Heed this message, heed this warning, ladies. And I like the fact that it was ultimately about the sisterhood bond between Anna and Elsa. I think it just came together really, really well. So you know what, we're going to give her the credit that she's due and put her in Honor to Us All. Okay, so next up on the list we have, I can't even see this poster, the AristoCats. Oh, this is cute. This is a classic. AristoCats came out, I think, in the 80s or 70s. I think it's 1970. I think. But yeah, it came out in 1970-ish. And this is yet another film that came out during the dark ages of Disney. You know, this was when Disney wasn't doing the best at the box office, and when it came to the animation, it's a little bit scratchier, it's a little bit more rough and ready, and that's because of the creative choice, sure, but it's also because of limited resources that they wanted to spend on these films. By the way, there are whole documentaries, especially on Disney Plus, that you can watch if you're interested in the history of Disney as a company. But yeah, this was during the time when Disney just wasn't doing the best financially speaking, you know, as a studio. But yes, it's the 1970s or so, and the AristoCats comes out, and it's a pretty decent film. It's very fun. I would say what really makes it feel classic is its iconic song, Everybody Wants to Be a Cat. Like that song is amazing. That song is brilliant. But we also have some, you know, less iconic, less timeless songs, like the one about the Siamese cats. That's very Asian coded, okay, very racist in that way. It's a product of its time for sure. So yeah, it's one of those ones where it's a bit spotty. There was also a song with the geese, I think, that's also pretty iconic. If you hear the tune, it's the dun 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 dun. I can't sing, whatever. It's fine. Also, when it comes to the story, it's pretty cute. I think you have these cats that come from this very wealthy household, and then they get lost and get mixed up with the O'Malley cat, who's a really cool character. And yeah, they see the rough side of the city or something along those lines, and then someone wants to kidnap them or something. I don't know. I can't remember. But yeah, it's just all about exploring these different cats from different corners of the neighborhood. And in the meantime, you have these really fun jazzy songs and some pretty scratchy but, you know, kind of classic animation that was a marker of this period of Disney's history. So all in all, I don't hate it, but I would not say that it's, you know, top-notch, creme de la creme Disney animated classic. So with all of that being said, I would put the AristoCats in Dig a Little Deeper. I think that's pretty fair, but I would put it above Oliver and Company. Okay, so next up, we are rewinding back 20 years and we have 1953's Peter Pan. This, I would say, is one of the most iconic Disney animated classics. When you think of Peter Pan, I mean, you might think of one of the remakes, you know, that's happened since then. Or most likely you think of the guy that's dressed in all green with the little red feather in his cap, because that is Peter Pan. Now, this is, of course, an adaptation of the book. Many of these Disney animated classics are adaptations, mind you. But it's one of those adaptations that has kind of surpassed the original material. Like, Disney has taken over this iconography so much. And also note that this is yet another character that has a brilliant character design. It's very simple. He's wearing all green, like I said, with the red feather in his cap, which makes sense because red and green are contrasting colors, right? And the image of him flying through the light blue or dark blue skies is, you know, immediately something that comes to mind when you think of the character. Not to mention the fact that he has one of the most iconic sidekicks in none other than Tinkerbell. Now listen, Tinkerbell is the one. She is the only one, okay? Little Miss Tinkerbell is surely one of the most recognized characters of all time. Again, brilliant character design. If you break down, you know, the color palette of the character and her costume, there's a reason why it's so easily replicable across different merchandise and costumes that kids can wear. And that just speaks to, again, the design of that character. But also her personality and her attitude is what really makes her stand out. She's not a wholly likable character. Like, Tinkerbell used to annoy me a lot actually when I was younger. Like, I used to be like, Tinkerbell, you're doing too much. She's kind of giving Miss Minutes, okay? And the way that Miss Minutes felt towards He Who Remains, it's like, okay, back it up just a little bit, right? But she was always possessive of Peter and she was extremely jealous when Wendy came into his life. And so, yeah, it made her a bit of an abrasive character. But I think this imperfection is what endears a lot of people to her. And not to mention in the second film, which yes, I have also seen and I used to watch all the time, mind you. In the second film, they give her an arc where she becomes, you know, more likable and amenable to Wendy's daughter. So I think with a character who starts off as flawed, you can kind of go somewhere with them, as opposed to a character who's already perfect and ends up just as perfect as they were before. And the same can be said for Peter. He also learns some lessons. He's also a little bit of a brat, actually, if you watch the film. Yeah, he's less of a perfect protagonist character. Obviously, young kids are drawn to his lifestyle, his like carefree lifestyle, where you don't have parents imposing rules on you and telling you what to do. You have the lost boys who are just kind of there gallivanting around on this island, living their best life. But, you know, this film obviously shows that there are shortcomings to that. And I think more than that, the live action remake from this year, I believe, delves into that a little bit more, just to really emphasize the loneliness of these characters, because too much of a good thing, right? But of course, just as important as the hero of the film, you also have the villain in Captain Hook with his sidekick, Shmi, and they're icons. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You know Captain Hook. Everyone knows Captain Hook. Oh, what an icon. I don't know this for a fact, but just thinking about his character design now, he's kind of giving Charles II. I wonder if that was intentional. He definitely looks like a Charles II type character, which is interesting, especially because they vilify him. But his clothes are giving very 18th century, 19th century. You have like the kind of maroon, reddish purple coat, which of course contrasts against Peter's green. Like, you're starting to see the theory here, right? And of course, purple is a classic Disney villain character. But yeah, Captain Hook is one of the most iconic villains, you know, of all time. And I would say, speaking again of the live action remake, Jude Law, who portrays him in that film, did a brilliant job. This film was actually really underrated. I discussed this in my Disney Animated Classics live action remakes tier list video, which you can check out. But yeah, that film was actually pretty decent, especially when it came to developing Peter and Captain Hook as characters. So in light of all of this, I'm gonna put Peter Pan in You're Welcome. You're welcome. This is a good film. Now, mind you, of course, we need to discuss the elephant in the room, or should I say the red face. Mind you, you have some period typical racism, which I think Disney Plus has like a warning about at the beginning of the film. And by the way, when it comes to that sort of thing, I do appreciate a warning as opposed to them trying to erase it. I don't think they should erase it, but I do think that they should make people aware that obviously the stereotypes and the poor depictions in some of their older projects are not on, and they're not a reflection of what we should be striving towards when it comes to representation today. Okay, so next up on the list, we have yet another poster that's impossible to decipher. The Black Couldron. Oh. Black Couldron is usually used as like the example of like Disney's dark ages. Like it's the epitome of Disney's dark ages. Now the Black Couldron came out in 1985, just a few years before the Renaissance period. You know, they just had to hold on for a little bit longer, and I'm glad that they did, because we got some magic at that time. But before then, you know, the Disney company was struggling, you know, once again. These were the years after, you know, Walt Disney, and they were still trying to figure a lot of things out. The Black Couldron is said to be one of the biggest flops that Disney has ever had. Although I don't know if that's been surpassed since then, because 2023 has been a rough year. Yeah, it was definitely a flop. Okay, off of the budget of 44 million, it made 21.3 million. Yeah, that's not even like recent releases have not been that bad, guys. Come on. You know, the Black Couldron really is the pits. But I have to say, as someone who checked it out in recent years, you know, it's not terrible creatively. I can kind of see why it didn't perform well, especially during that time. I feel like, again, it lacks that Disney magic. There's nothing special or particular about the animation, the characters. You know, a lot of the animation from the 80s kind of looks like what we got with Black Couldron, so it doesn't really stand out. And this was a time when they had like He-Man and stuff, and so I can kind of see where the Black Couldron fit in. And I think that was its problem. It just kind of blended into the background. It didn't really stand out. And again, it lacked that Disney magic. The main characters are not too memorable. The storyline is also a bit weird. And this film is darker in tone, you know, in comparison to what Disney was doing prior, and also what people expected from the company. So obviously when they're veering off, you know, course, there's always going to be some bumpiness. There's always going to be a learning curve. And this film is considerably darker than what came before, so that also may have contributed to its very low box office. But I think if it was done well, you know, extremely well, then it would have still been a success. But because it's also a very middling, mediocre film that's way off course for what Disney usually produced during this time, that just compounded to an overall failure. But the plot is, I think, about this like magical pig or something that has special powers. I said, like, let me know. Listen, if the Black Couldron is your favorite Disney animated classic, it could be possible. Let me know what the plot is down in the comments below. I think there's a magical pig, and I think the villain, who is actually kind of iconic from this film, wants the magical pig to resurrect the dead and command an army of the dead. Again, dark, very dark, very dark. But speaking of the villain, here you have the Horned King holding the honor of being a villain in a Disney animated classic, and he's not the most, you know, well remembered or anything like that. But what stands out to me is, one, the darkness and the horror of the character, and two, just how terrifying he is visually. Like, the Horned King is about it. Like I said, he wants to command an army of the undead. Like he's serious. All these other villains that are cackling and like rubbing their hands and stroking their cats, he is about it. He is serious. He is demonic. Like, you don't mess with the Horned King. So when it comes to my ranking, even though I didn't hate this film when I watched it, I think there are some that are worse, but it's pretty like unmemorable. It's not the best that Disney has had to offer, so I think it's safe to say we're gonna put it in We Don't Talk About. Okay, so next up on the list we've got is Bolts. I got really unlucky with the selection. I promise you I'm a Disney fan. I promise you I'm a fan of these films. But like, what do you want me to do with Bolt? Like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do with this? Look at the material. Bolt is just like, again, another just throwaway. I'm sorry. Do you remember what happened in Bolt? I only remembered because I was looking at pictures to save for this video. And I think he was like a superstar dog, right? Like he was a dog actor in Hollywood. And his human companion was the child actress who was voiced by Miley Cyrus. Am I making that up? No, I think that's... And wasn't John Travolta in this as well? I think that's why I watched this film at the time, mind you, is because Miley Cyrus was in it and I was a huge Hannah Montana fan. So I was like, oh my god, Hannah Montana in a Disney animated classic. Like, that's crazy. I don't think she had the best voice to voice this little girl because her voice sounds so much more mature. But she's Hannah Montana. So like, you're not going to say no to her. Okay, she ran Disney Channel for like years. But when it comes to Bolt overall, like, it's not that girl, I'm afraid. It's a decent, okay film. It would have been fine if it came from DreamWorks, you know, Illumination. Yeah, it's more like Illumination's bag now. Like, it's giving House of Pets. But it's not the creme de la creme of Disney. Come on, let's have standards. But yeah, this is a time when Disney was still trying to appeal to boys. Like, they were really trying to get the boys in. Really trying to get those grubby little boys in. Okay, they're like, we're not just a Disney princess studio. We can do boy stuff too. But unfortunately, majority of people said, maybe you should go back to Disney princesses. Maybe you should do more of that stuff. So when it comes to Bolt, I'm going to put this in... We don't talk about Bruno. Okay, so next up on our list, I can't believe this selection. Google did me dirty. But next up is The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Guys, I'm so sorry. It was random. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to waste your time. It's going straight into the unknown. I watched this one time whilst I was doing something else, probably editing a YouTube video. And you could put a gun to my head and ask me what happens in this film. I would not be able to tell you. I think it's like an adaptation of the Headless Horseman, right? Like, Ichabod loses his head or something? Or is that the villain of the film? We're not wasting time on this. No. Okay, it's Into the Unknown, right at the back. Okay, right at the back, because I have no clue. This is not... Please. Next up on our list, we have an actual certified Disney classic in Dumbo. I mean, this is it. This is what we came for. Dumbo, baby mine, please, makes me cry each and every time. You want to talk about iconic songs? Baby mine. Oh, stop it. Dumbo is a brilliant classic animated film. Definitely a product of its time. You have this baby elephant drinking, getting drunk, getting high. Okay. And not to mention the Black Crows. Even though their song is iconic, like, when I See an Elephant Fly is that girl. Like, she really is an amazing song. But obviously we're leaning into some unfortunate stereotypes with that depiction of those characters. So yeah, definitely a product of its time. But overall, such a sweet animated classic with one of the most iconic, not just Disney characters, but animated characters, period, with Dumbo. Now, because it is so iconic, of course, Disney has recently remade it with a live action version. And I thought the live action version was quite decent. I haven't watched it since, you know, I watched it the first time. And since I reviewed it, which was one of my first reviews on my channel, which you can check out if you want. But, you know, I thought it was decent when I saw it, but I didn't go back to rewatch it. And when it comes to the original Dumbo, whilst I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite films of all time, it is a film that I would happily rewatch, and I have watched several times over the years. The only thing that stops me from watching Dumbo too many times is the fact that it is quite sad. It's very sad, it's very tragic, and it's really hard to go through those scenes where he loses his mother, where he's going through that hard time in the circus. Like, it's sad. So it wasn't actually a massive hit at the time. According to Wikipedia, it made like around about 1.3 million in 1941 dollars. So that's very, very bad even by that standard. I think Dumbo is a great example of just how short-sighted we can be sometimes when it comes to box office success, because even if the opening weekend of a film isn't huge, and even if their whole box office run is a little bit disappointing, it doesn't mean that the film will be a failure overall, because these films live on, especially these Disney animated classics. They're part of a legacy for this company, so there's always a chance to rediscover them, and there's always a chance to give them the recognition that they were due if they were good films. And that's why I personally have never been wholly against the live action remakes, because I see that as a chance for younger generations to rediscover these stories as well, and perhaps dive into the animated classics if they should wish to. Yeah, I've never hated the remakes point blank, but they do obviously vary in quality. But I think it's wonderful to see something like Dumbo, which was a flop at the time, just kind of simmer. It simmered, you know, you let it cook over a century and it becomes iconic, and it's, you know, deservedly so. So with that in mind, I'm going to put Dumbo in You're Welcome, but higher than Peter Pan. Okay, so next up we have yet another true classic with Sleeping Beauty. Finally, we've got some more Disney princesses here. Oh my god, it's been ages. But yes, Sleeping Beauty is of course centered on Princess Aurora. She falls into this sleep because of the evil witch Maleficent, who's angry about not being invited to Aurora's baptism or something, her first birthday or whatever. I guess she's just angry about the way that the king and queen had treated her in general. So she bewitches Aurora and she falls into this deep sleep, and she ends up getting woken up by true love's kiss from this handsome prince who's frolicking in the forest when we meet him. Do you remember the name of the prince? Oh, comment down below. What's the name of Princess Aurora's prince? I'll give you a second. Philip! His name was Prince Philip. His name is Prince Philip. Not one of my favorite Disney princes, if I may be so honest. Now, whilst I don't love Sleeping Beauty, this is yet another one of those Disney princess stories that was ripped to shreds in the early 2010s, in this BuzzFeed era, right? Where they were like, Disney princesses are crap and they're bad for feminism. They're awful. Get rid of them. But yeah, and then Disney fed into that and gave us, you know, Frozen and Moana, right, to combat this criticism. And Sleeping Beauty to me is like the epitome of all of these negative comments. I do agree with most of them when it comes to this character. I mean, Sis is barely even in her own film. Okay, and she's not really memorable as a character, in my opinion. But there are a few things that Sleeping Beauty does have working for it. First of all is the animation style here. The artistic quality of the animation in Sleeping Beauty cannot be understated. You can tell that it's just different to some of the other animated films that came out during this time. The animators went for this more, I think it's Art Nouveau art style when it came to animating this film, and it's just like beautiful. It's really, really stunning. The color palette is stunning. You have like the watercolor effect as well when it comes to setting the atmosphere, the world of this film. Like, this is a really, really beautiful film, and it is visually distinct from some of the other films, like I said, from this time. Another thing I really love about Sleeping Beauty is the song Once Upon a Dream. Yes, I do love that song quite a bit. And it does have heaps of Disney magic that is very much helped by not Aurora herself, because she's mostly absent from this film, but Maleficent. Maleficent, I think, is the reason why this film has stood the test of time, because she is a brilliant villain. Just the look of her, the iconography of Maleficent is so long lasting, to the point where they were of course able to create a live action version of the character played by Angelina Jolie, who was just as iconic, if not more so, for the 21st century in comparison to the original animated version. So that is good character design. That is, you want to talk about an iconic character, when you have both versions become iconic, that's just legendary. So I have to pay my respects to Sleeping Beauty for giving us one of the most amazing villains of all time. And with that in mind, I'm gonna put her in You're Welcome after Dumbo. Next up on the list, we have another Fantasia. Google! Fantasia, like I said, this is a very like experimental type of Disney animated classic. It's not like the rest that tell these very linear stories in a very classic way. It's not an adaptation in a traditional sense. They do have some, you know, mini stories that are told that are adaptations of classic stories. And by classics, I mean literally Greco-Roman gods, you know, with some of them being depicted here. But it's just like this mashup of different mini stories set to this orchestral masterpiece that is the soundtrack. So it's a very different thing that kind of lives in its own realm. It's still not my favorite kind of Disney animated classic. Like when I think of these classics, I don't really jump to Fantasia, but I will say I preferred, surprisingly, I preferred the original film to the 2000 version, which to me was just not memorable whatsoever. The original film though, again, product of its time. And going back to my discussion of cultural sensitivity and talking about whether something should be outrightly censored or if there should just be warnings, Fantasia didn't even get the choice when it came to Disney Plus because it has already been censored over the years, especially when it came to depicting these little black half goat half human characters that were actually Pickaninny caricatures, which were typical during the early 20th century. Extremely racist, extremely offensive. But yeah, that animation design is very distinctly the Pickaninny caricature, and it wouldn't stand. Like, so they have censored it over the years, but there are still images floating around because the internet is going to internet. Even putting that to the side, I still wouldn't say that Fantasia is like my favorite franchise in the Disney lineup, but it's cool. They were doing something different, and that's fun. And so since I do prefer it to the millennial version, I'm gonna put it in dig a little deeper, but right at the end, like even past Oliver and Company. Okay, so next up we have 1973's Robin Hood. Now I would say that this is a pretty iconic Disney animated film, right? Like, I think when people think of Robin Hood, they tend to think of that fox. But I mean, what else can I say about Robin Hood? His costume has always struck me as being very similar to that of Peter Pan. You know, and it came out 20 years after Peter Pan, so maybe that's not accidental, like maybe that's something. I don't know. But honestly, growing up, the earliest memory that I have of Robin Hood is probably King Richard. I think, you know, King Richard, that lion, the lion heart. Oh, I see what they did. Richard the Lionheart. They portrayed him as big brain energy. It's funny because I distinctly remember an interview with Chris Evans where he said his favorite Disney film was Robin Hood, and I was like, Christopher, have you seen any of the other ones? But listen, if Robin Hood is also your favorite film, let me know down in the comments. Okay, I'm not judging. I'm kind of judging just a little bit. Have you seen any of the others? But yeah, I understand if you grew up with it, you're always gonna have that bias, so I respect that. But if you're like younger and you like Robin Hood, how did that happen? Like, just talk me through it. Like, how do we get there? Another thing that I always think of when it comes to Robin Hood is how people always use it as an example of, you know, when Disney was really struggling and how they would reuse the same sort of footage or the same sort of animations in their projects. They always use Robin Hood as an example alongside something else. I can't remember. But they have, I think Jungle Book. That's it, Jungle Book. Robin Hood and Jungle Book have some of the same frames, and it was like a cost-cutting measure. So in the interest of moving along swiftly, I'm going to be placing Robin Hood in Dig a Little Deeper. Yeah, and I'm going to put it honestly at the end. Honestly, Robin Hood is just not that girl to me. I'm so sorry, but like, I would even rather watch Fantasia again than that. And speaking of, I love a good segue, an unintentional segue. Speaking of the Jungle Book, that is the next film on this list. Talk about a Disney classic. Talk about this is it. Now let me tell you why this is it, okay? Because not only do you have the amazing characters of Mowgli, then you also have Baloo, and you also have Bagheera. Like, this trio right here. This tree right here. This film has one of the best depictions of friendship you could ever find ever. Like, oh, that is truly the best part of this film, is the friendship aspect, especially between, of course, Mowgli and Baloo. And another thing that makes this film so iconic and so timeless are the songs, especially Bare Necessities. Please, 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 please. And I Want to Be Like You. Guys, two songs that are just, they're groundbreaking. Two songs that literally just have stood the test of time. They are groundbreaking. They are brilliant, brilliant, iconic songs across all film in general, actually, not even just Disney animated classics. To say nothing of the villain, who is, of course, Shere Khan, who is terrifying. That tiger, that tiger is the predecessor of Scar from The Lion King, and he means business. Like, he is absolutely serious. This is yet another villain that you don't want to be messing around with. And that just helps elevate this film even further, because like I said, a great villain is just as key as a great protagonist. And not to mention, this film was so good that it spun off to an amazing live action remake that I think was even better than the original. So you need to have good material for that to happen, and this film absolutely does have that. So with that in mind, I'm going to be putting The Jungle Book in honor to us all. Okay, so next up on the list, we have another poster that I can barely see. Oh, Saludos Amigos. This, I think, was a product of Walt Disney being obsessed with South America, I think. He went on a trip there and he was just really fascinated by the culture and he was inspired by it. And so this film was born. I think this came out in the 1940s, right? Like in the post-war era where Disney was still finding its footing. And so when it comes to my ranking, I will put this in, let's just put it in Into the Unknown. Into the Unknown. This barely made a dent in my memory, so I'm just going to put this right alongside his friend Ichabod. Okay, so next up, ooh, look at this. Finally, Google gave me a good one. Next up, we have the most recent Disney animated classic in Wish. Now, if you want to hear my full thoughts on Wish, you can check out my review on my channel. But this is an unfairly much maligned film that is way, way better than I thought it would be. And I had a great, great time with it. Now, I'm not able to speak on its legacy or anything like that because it came out so recently. So we don't really know what its lasting power looks like yet. But I predict, okay, I predict when all of the dust settles, when all of the smoke has cleared, that people will discover this film in the near future, perhaps when it drops on streaming, and they'll realize how much of a fun Disney classic it was. For one, the songs in this film are fantastic for the most part. Guys, come closer. I have been playing This Is the Thanks I Get on repeat for the last week and a half, literally just on repeat. I played it so many times over this last week that I almost made it on my Spotify Wrapped. Like, I'm not even checking. That is an elite villain song, and Chris Pine absolutely did what was necessary. He absolutely did what needed to be done. So that's one thing. The music is great. And speaking of the villain, I think Magnifico is a phenomenal villain, a great addition to the iconic Disney villains lineup. But then you also have the protagonist of the story, Asha, and she's a really brilliant character in her own right. I did say that Disney are in danger with creating these very homogeneic female characters in their projects that are all adorkable. I remember the word when I was editing. Adorkable. They have that kind of similar personality trait, which Asha definitely falls into. But I do still think that Asha is a really great character with a really great story. And speaking of story, the story of Wish is just a really beautiful homage to the Disney legacy and a really great way of celebrating 100 years of Disney. Now, this film isn't perfect, okay? It does have its flaws, as I mentioned in my review, but it hurts me to see how much hate this film got even before anyone saw a single frame, and that just speaks to people's attitudes towards Disney right now. But with all of that being said, when it comes to my placement of Wish, I'm gonna put her in, I think she's in between You're Welcome, because literally You're Welcome. If you watch Wish, get upon my recommendation. First of all, I'm very honored. And secondly, I really hope you enjoy it. And if you do, you're welcome. But I think she's in between You're Welcome and Honor to Us All. I'm going to put her in Honor to Us All, okay? But I'm not delusional, so I'm going to put her at the back, okay? The back of the queue. But she is a really great film. Go watch it. Please go watch it, okay? Because it's good. Okay, so we only have 3 more to go, guys. We're holding on strong. And next up is 101 Dalmatians. This is another classic, right? Like when you think of Disney animated classics, this is just one that really stands out. But to be honest, when it comes to the 101 Dalmatians franchise, if you will, the standout, okay, the real icon has always been Miss Cruella de Vil. There's a reason why, well, actually, there's 2 reasons why the recent live action remake was centered on Cruella. One is because they already did the 101 Dalmatians live action remakes in the 90s, where Cruella was portrayed by, Gwen Close, okay? But also because Cruella is such an incredible, iconic character who's instantly recognizable and just so memorable, that she warrants even a second adaptation. And by the way, I really enjoyed the Cruella live action remake, and I do have a review of that if you want to scroll through my channel. But yeah, I think ultimately it's Cruella who allows the 101 Dalmatians films to stand out from the crowd of animal-led films in Disney's roster. And not to mention, the iconic song from this film is also centered on Cruella, and that is of course Cruella de Vil, a song that is composed by the male character who owns the dogs, the man the male partner. I can't remember their name. Again, I can't remember the humans' names. I can't remember the dogs' names. They're cute, they're adorable, but like, it's Cruella. Cruella is the star. Cruella, and also the fact that the dogs all look the same and they're all Dalmatians. Those 2 components have allowed this film to stand the test of time. So when it comes to the placement of 101 Dalmatians on this tier list, to me, it's like the dog version of AristoCats, right? But slightly more iconic, considerably more iconic. I'm gonna put this in, dig a little deeper, but higher than AristoCats. Okay, so we only have 2 more to go, and surprisingly, there are no films featured in the A Star Is Born tier. Listen, this is Google. This is Google's I'm so sorry. I promise you I'm a huge fan of these films, but like, I can't lie. Like, it has to be my accurate rating. So yeah, none of these have been S tier so far. But that's all about to change. That's all about to change, because we have one of the few Renaissance era Disney animated classics to come up from this bunch with Hercules. Hercules as a film raised me. That's not even an exaggeration. I used to watch this film on repeat when I was younger. This film taught me the English language pretty much. And I have mentioned this before in a previous video where I ranked my top 10 Disney animated classics. I can't believe it's taken me this long to mention that. But yeah, I do have a previous video doing so if you want to check it out. And spoiler alert, Hercules is in that list and it's very high up. I love Hercules. This is what I'm talking about. It has it all. It has it all. Brilliant story. This is an incredible take on Greco-Roman mythology. This is the reason why I'm so into Greco-Roman mythology to begin with. It's because of this film right here. Yes, it is. Okay, brilliant story about this demigod that falls on earth and loses almost all of his powers and has to learn to become human. And then he goes from being 0 to a hero with Phil, okay, his friend, his buddy, his trainer, his manager. He and Hercules' trusty sidekick Pegasus guide Hercules on his way to becoming a true hero so that he can ascend back to Mount Olympus where he belongs with his father Zeus. And throughout these adventures we see him slay these various monsters and demons that harken back to the labors of Hercules from actual ancient Greek myth. But then at the center of it all, you have one of the most amazing protagonists ever put to screen in Hercules. Disney really cooked when it came to the character of Hercules. Oh my god. Listen. Disney is currently working on a live action Hercules as we speak. Literally as we sit here and speak, Disney is working on this. And Guy Ritchie is directing, which I think could be a great match, or it could be a disaster. He was talking about TikTok last time and I got very scared. But my point is, the stakes could not be higher. There are certain films where it's like, guys, you need to get this right. And Mulan was one of them. The Lion King was one of them. Aladdin was one of them. The Renaissance films, basically. The Renaissance films. But Hercules, if they mess up Hercules, I don't know. I can't be held responsible for my actions. So yeah, we have a brilliant story. We have brilliant characters. Even the love interest is done perfectly. We're not talking Maid Marian from Robin Hood. We're talking Meg. We're talking Meg. Okay, Megara. Friends call me Meg, or at least they would if I had any. Like that Meg, she is that girl. She is tenacious. She's powerful. She's flawed. She makes mistakes. She betrays our hero. We hate her, but then we still love her in the end. Like that is all. You want to talk about complex female representation? Meg is it. She's a brilliant character. And then we have the villain with Hades, Hercules' uncle, mind you, okay, brother to Zeus, okay, he was condemned to stay in Hades. This character is just so brilliant. His mannerisms, the way that he talks like he's from a different time. He's not really from ancient Greece. He's from the 90s. And it's not just in the way that the character is voiced. It's not just in the dialogue written for the character. It's also in his design. The fact that as he gets angrier, like the heat radiating off of him, his heat hair changes color. Again, stroke of genius. Like, we're talking about the people, the artists in Disney just giving this film their all. You can just tell so much thought went into this to make this special. And even though it wasn't one of the more successful Disney films, especially not from the Renaissance era, I think it has absolutely stood the test of time. Certainly for this girl. You can't tell me anything about Hercules, okay? I mean, you want to talk about character design. You want to talk about just the animation style. The fact that they harken back again to, you know, classical art, ancient Greeks. It's just a completely different animation style to what we see again across the field when it comes to Disney animated classics. And to say nothing of the music. Guys, please be serious. Guys, the Hercules soundtrack. Also, can I just say, even though I watched this film when I was 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, like really from a young age, it took me about 20 years to realize the stroke of genius that it was for the soundtrack of Hercules to be sung by gospel singers. The soundtrack actually mimics gospel music because this is the gospel truth. This is an ancient religion, ancient Greek religion. And so it makes sense that you have music that also harkens back to religion and Christianity. Like it took me forever to see that connection. So, considering the fact that the S tier for this ranking is named after one of the songs from this film, I think it's more than fitting for me to go on ahead and slide Hercules in the top tier of this ranking. Now, I wish I could end on such a high note. I wish I could end with this note of positivity, but I can't because we have one more film to go through. But don't worry, this is going to be very quick. This is going to be very snappy. Okay, next one up we have is Home on the Range. But still, it is a Disney film and it is in this lineup, unfortunately. So we have to go ahead and pay our respects and rank it. And I'm going to be swift for this. This is going straight in. We don't talk about Bruno. Right at the end, I would sooner rewatch The Black Couldron than Home on the Range. I distinctly disliked Home on the Range. Please don't make me sit through that again. That's it from me, guys. Oh my god, we finally did it. Now that I have ranked 20 of the 62 Disney animated classics, it's time for you guys to let me know what your ranking would be down in the comments below. If you want to throw in some other Disney animated classics that didn't show up this time, then go on ahead, but we will be doing a parts 2 and 3 in the future, so stay tuned for those. But in the meantime, please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.